Hey guys, welcome to my script building series. Very excited to jump into this. This series is intended for people who want to use my mistakes and learn from them instead of committing them themselves. Hopefully you can make the next catfishing. This website that we're looking at here is the script tool, the official script tool. This is where you're going to be able to make all of your scripts. I'll have links for everything in the comments below, pinned for you to easily access. This first video is going to dive into the base 3. We're going to look at all of the characteristics of the base 3, what they share, how you can use them to make a good script yourself. If you just dive in and start doing random stuff, you're going to get a random output. So there's got to be some rules that we follow here, and we're going to learn those rules by looking at the tried, the true, the tested, trouble brewing, bad moon rising, sex and violence. Let's jump right in. So, on all the base 3 scripts, they have these several things in common. Each script has its own theme and puzzle to solve. Each script has a demon escape route. Each script also has reasons for evil players to die at night. All of the scripts have some form of outsider manipulation, which can be intuited from and help you solve the game. Every single script also has synergy between towns and evils and being able to bluff certain mechanical things that can take place. There's also an alternative win condition on each of the base 3 scripts. Publicly claimed roles exist on all 3 of the base scripts. There's a demon finder among them all. There's alignment checking on each one in different formats. There's some form of neighbor seating interaction that exists on all of the base scripts as well. And finally, role confirmation. So why do the base 3 scripts all work? Well, let's start with that first topic, theme and puzzle. So among all 3 of the scripts, Trouble Brewing, Bad Moon Rising, Sex and Violence, each one has a different feel to it. People tell you when they're going to play a BMR-ish script, you have an idea of what that means. If you hear you're going to play a Sex and Violence script, your brain probably goes to Vortox, Pit Hag, Madness. All of that stuff invokes a feeling, right? That's what happens when you think about certain iconic scripts. When you think about catfishing, you think about a lunatic being gaslit, right, and dragged along. And still no reason for them to come out because of the fear of being jumped to. Amnesiac powers galore, multi-kills, but within a well-constrained puzzle that's very solvable. It's very interesting, and that's what a good script can do. Trouble Brewing's kind of your classic puzzle. It's got just enough information and mechanical roles to provide a fun experience. However, usually you're trying to determine what kind of minion is in play. That's really the experience on Trouble Brewing from the townsfolk side, because all of the minions are quiet minions. Quiet minions in this circumstance means that they don't announce themselves publicly. Meanwhile, Bad Moon Rising has an entirely different puzzle to solve. All of the demons are loud. Each one of them has a different kill tempo. None of the minions on here are loud. They can be loud depending on claims that are in the game, but for the most part, all of the minion roles on here supplement the demon type and the ability to bluff in-play townsfolk roles. The DA can come in to bluff the tea lady or the pacifist. The assassin can try to help you bluff gossip, among other things. They can also supplement a Zomboul or a Pucka that didn't get a chance to kill. Sex and Violence, conversely, has very loud minions and not very loud demons. All of the demons on here are, for the most part, quiet. There's a little bit more going on when it comes to that, but let's talk about the minions really quick. Almost all of the minions announce themselves. Your twins are announced by the fact that a good player knows that the other twin is in play. The Witch will come out if enough players nominate. The Sarah Novus specifically targets a player to be mad, therefore another player knows that they're in play. And the Pit Hag physically changes your character token. On Sex and Violence, there's no character that thinks they're another role. So when you get changed, you know you've been changed. The demons all have different misinformation. 3 of the demons create some form of poison, while 2 of them modify outsider count. Those are all pieces of the puzzle. The Fangu itself, though, requires that the outsiders stay kind of hidden because, hey, you might be the Fangu now. It's very scary. Now, just a quick note on the differences between the 3 scripts when it comes to this. You have quiet minions on Trouble Brewing and Bad Moon Rising. They're quiet because they blend in with town, they don't announce themselves, and they're part of the puzzle. On Sex and Violence, it's the opposite, where your demons are quiet and your minions are loud. Why does this matter on a given script? If we know which minions are in play, That's a huge issue if your demons create no misinformation. So let's look at TB and just parse this out for a moment. If we know 100% that there's a Serra Novus in play, and the only demon possible is the imp, I know for a fact that I'm not being poisoned. I know those outsider claims are bogus if they go beyond what we expected. I know that there's no way for the demon to die by execution and continue the game. You know, do you get what I'm saying? Like, that's the point behind that. So the way that BMR works on it, BMR has the ability for the demons to be loud, because this is a very mechanical script, by the way. The minions create a lot of questions on what's actually happening in town. If it was the opposite, then we'd have sex and violence, right? In this script, the demons are the ones creating the misinformation, so it's perfectly okay for the minions to have a supplemental role in that effect. All right, next topic is the escape routes for the demon. Trouble Brewing has a couple of routes here, and they're lovely. We have the imp. The imp is probably the best demon in the game. Why is that? The imp has a very basic power of killing a player, which, you know, the majority of demons do that. But the imp can, at some point, choose themselves and pass to a living minion. That is incredibly strong, and it helps create a lot of misinformation, right? So if you have been voted on and somehow tie the vote, you can get out of there by choosing yourself tonight as long as you have a living minion. That's scary for town. They have to restart some of that puzzle on figuring out where the hell you went. They also have the Scarlet Woman on this script, which is an incredibly powerful minion. If you were to execute the imp with a Scarlet Woman, or if a Slayer had shoot the imp, and the game keeps going, the Scarlet Woman is there to kind of be your safety net. It actually allows you to play differently too. It's Bad Moon Rising, which has 2 escape routes. Well, we'll say 3 escape routes. We have the Zombul, right? The Zombul can die once. We have the Devil's Advocate, a very powerful minion that stops you from being executed on a whatever day that you're protected. And then finally, we have the Mastermind, a reason for no deaths and a potentially different win condition that could come into play if you've been executed. It's a different flavor from the Scarlet Woman, where you just stay alive and move positions. There's no way to move the demon on BMR. But with the kill strength on this script and the ambiguity of what is actually happening mechanically, it works very well for Bad Moon Rising. Sex and Violence goes an entirely different direction. On Sex and Violence, you have the Fangu, probably the, if not the strongest, the second strongest next to the Imp, because it not only creates an extra evil, it jumps and moves the demon. It has all of the outsiders start playing chaotically, right? They might become the demon as an escape route. That's a goal for the Fangu to achieve whenever they're in play. You also have the Pit Hag. The Pit Hag can just make a new demon. They could choose themselves. They can choose the same demon to switch demons so that you could confuse town in like a Sage situation when they're trying to solve for a Vortox or no Dashi, potentially a Vigor Mortis. And then last but not least, and one of the strongest outsiders for the evil team, is the Barber. You'll see this on a lot of custom scripts as a catch-all, and it's great. One more note about BMR, there is one last escape route which is really interesting, and that character is the Lunatic. The Lunatic isn't a direct escape route as much as it is as a fallback. If you've been outed as a potential demon, you can always pretend that you're just the Lunatic. It's not as strong as the other types of escape routes, but you know, it's there and I thought I'd mention. Now, on to outsider manipulation. Trouble Brewing, the strongest minion in the game based on win rate, is the Baron. Baron's ability is, there are extra outsiders at play. Yes, there are. We all love ourselves a nice active Baron, but the real ability here is that it removes 2 townsfolk. Townsfolk solve the game. You've removed 2 of them. Incredibly powerful. Whenever you put this on a script, a custom script, just think about what else is on that script prior. This is not a this is a good one to have on there, but just note that it can be incredibly strong on certain scripts. One more form of outsider manipulation on Trouble Brewing is the Drunk. The Drunk is actually a negative form of outsider manipulation. Now, that doesn't mean that it removes an outsider. It just hides an outsider. If we have an 8-player game and no one is claiming an outsider role, somebody is the Drunk. That leaves claim space open for the evil team to jump on that and assume the role of one of the, face-up outsiders, as we would call them. So that's something important to note as well. So the drunk itself is a form of outsider manipulation. Bad Moon Rising has the Godfather. Godfather's ability is start knowing which outsiders are in play. If one died today, choose a player tonight, they die. -1 or +1 outsiders. So the ability of the Godfather allows you on a script to allow yourself to have any amount of face-up outsiders. Because if a Godfather's in play, it could just be the evil team bluffing outsider. That's why this script works like it does. Usually the lunatic is not a hidden outsider the entire game like the drunk is. The lunatic eventually, you would hope, figures out that they're the lunatic. Obviously it's possible that they don't. There's also the goon on here. It's not a form of outsider manipulation, but it is a role and something you should consider on custom scripts. A role that may not come out at all. And if they get turned evil, they might never come out. That can really, really help the evil team with any kind of outsider bluffs or hiding any kind of outsiders. Another point to this is the Godfather itself makes them consider a little bit more before they execute a claimed outsider. That extra kill that the Godfather might put out there can be pretty harsh, right? It could be game ending. If you played BMR, and you're in a Final Four situation, you hit the wrong target, that's it. On a custom script like Catfishing, which has the Godfather, amazing situations can come up from that. And there's a drunk on that script too, where you don't even know if you're gonna hit one. So these are all things to consider when we're talking about outsider manipulation and what kind of roles you want on your custom script. For Sex and Violence, the outsider manipulation comes from the demons entirely. It's specifically the Fangu and the Vigor Mortis, and part of them being in the game at all helps you solve for that, right? So what does that mean? The outsiders might not ever come out. That's part of a problem, right? But as they die, the first thing you're gonna hear from a dead outsider is, hey, it's not a Fangu game. Sure, I mean, yeah, if they're a good player, that's good to know, right? There's some shenanigans going on potentially, but that is very likely the case. The outsider manipulation created here is the same across all three scripts. It's basically a factor of 2. So the Godfather goes -1 to +1. Sex and Violence has -1 with Vig or +1 with Fangu. And TB has the Baron. Now, I would argue again that the drunk is technically a -1, but it's kind of a soft outsider manipulation, so we're not going to push on that too much. But it's something to consider when you're making your scripts. The next topic is the synergy between towns and evils and the ability to bluff different roles between them. So on Trouble Brewing, there's confirmation roles. We got the Washerwoman, you've got the Librarian, you've got the Undertaker, potentially a Raven Keeper. That's very strong information. Evil has a minion that literally sees the Grim. That would eat half of the rolls at the top here because it's an evil role. And that allows the evil team to bluff those rolls and create misinformation. Also, the spy has the ability to misregister. And I want to point out a couple of things. You'll notice that the top 3 characters, the Washerwoman, the Librarian, and the Investigator, all have 2 pings, right? And if you're the Washerwoman and you go to your 2 pings, one of them will typically tell you that they are that role, and the other one will typically tell you they're not that role. The other ping is there for a specific purpose. It can be abused by evil if you were to ping on both and then they create a double claim. But one of the interesting things that synergizes here with the spy is a drunk player who is seen by a Washerwoman as a townsfolk role by pinging off of the spy on the other end. That is script synergy. That is something that's happening here, and it's a possibility whenever you go talk to your pings on what could be happening. That's something to consider when you're throwing a spy on a script. Are there things that are using or abusing the ability to misregister, right? Are there things that use or abuse the ability to confirm other players? That's why it's very important to recognize the synergies between a lot of your scripts. Just to point at Catfishing, they don't have the spy, but they do have the widow. Among that, other kinds of confirmatory roles like the dreamer and the gambler, right? Very similar stuff. The Librarian has a very strong synergy between that and the spy, because you could ping off the spy, screwing up what the townsfolk would believe is the outsider count when it pings off the spy and sees a drunk, and neither one is claiming drunk. The spy doesn't even have to know that. It's very strong. The ability of the Slayer to shoot the Recluse is very interesting and bluffable by the evil team as well, right? If the Slayer were to shoot the Imp, and the Imp was claiming Recluse, they will die. Doesn't matter what they're claiming. But a Scarlet Woman on there allows that to be a bluffable situation. The Virgin and the Spy is another great synergy. I just should throw this out there. The Spy is a very underrated minion. It's very, very, very strong, but it is input versus output type of stuff, right? The Spy only accepts misinformation. Things like the Poisoner are much more powerful normally because it outputs that misinformation. Moving on from that, the synergy that we should talk about the most here on Bad Moon Rising is obviously the deaths and the survivals of executions. On Bad Moon Rising, if you survive an execution, you're one of about 5 different roles, and only one of them is an evil role. We've got the Sailor, we've got the Tea Lady, we've got the Pacifist, and we've got the Fool. Any one of those could be a reason that you survive execution, or you could just be randomly being tagged by the Devil's Advocate, and you could see how that works together. The different deaths that happen. We have good roles that create extra deaths. The Gossip, the Gambler, the Grandmother, right? And then we have a couple of outsiders that screw with that misinformation as well. We have the ability for the evil team to bluff some of these roles. As a assassin, you could simply kill yourself, claim that you gambled somebody incorrectly, and then put a bunch of sus on that player. It's a great play. As the DA, you could just pretend you're the tea lady. You could save one of your neighbors, and then the other one dies, and maybe it was an assassin. Who knows, right? That's part of the idea here. As the innkeeper, you're creating a drunk player between 2 players. Same thing with the Sailor, right? You can bluff that as something like the Pucka as to why somebody's information is bad. Something interesting to keep in mind, right? There's also roles that prevent deaths from happening, and demons that don't kill every single night. The Zombul does not kill every day. They only kill if nobody else died during the day. That can explain things via the Minstrel, right? Via the Exorcist. The Pucka. Pucka has a very strange synergy where if you execute the player they chose, there's no deaths. Those work together. You don't know which demon it was immediately, right? The Poe can literally skip killing at the benefit of killing multiple players the next day, which could be very beneficial, especially if they sink into roles like the Fool, or if they know a tea lady exists and they're trying to check the neighbors out there. Maybe there's an evil goon between them and they're trying to sink into, or a goon doesn't have to be evil. They're trying to make it evil, right? Those are things to look out for on why this script synergy works, right? Keep this in mind when you're making your custom script. This is a lot of synergy. It's not perfect, right? Let's talk about an imperfect example. The Professor. The Professor is supposed to be a bluffable role by evil with the Shabaloth. The Shabaloth itself kills 2 players each night, and then on the following night, one might be regurgitated. The earliest time that a Shabaloth can regurgitate is night 3. That does mean that a Professor who resurrects on night 2 is never going to be bluffable by evil. There's ways around that as a storyteller. You could pacifist save somebody, yada yada, but that's storytelling, that's not script building. These are just things to note when you're putting together a script that even the base 3 have a little bit here and there of some janky points, but this is fine for the most part, obviously. And then of course we have sex and violence. So what can you bluff on sex and violence? Well, it's not exactly the same, right? One thing that you can bluff that's very straightforward is the Cerenovus and the Mutant. The Cerenovus can make themselves mad, they can break it, they can get the ST to kill them and execute them, and then claim they were the Mutant. So that's strong in itself. That messes with outsider count. It's a very confirmatory thing that happened. You're either this or that. On scripts that feature solely the Mutant, things get a little wonky. Your storyteller has been put in a position where they will choose to either confirm this mutant player or not confirm the mutant and just have them be a townsfolk at that point. It's strange. But with the Cerenovus, right, there's reasons for that to happen and to continue, and you're not just a hard confirmed player. You could just be Ceromad or the Cerenovus, right? That's bluffing that. Other than that, there's some other weird synergies, right? You can bluff things because the demons on here, 2 of them at least, kill their evil team, the Vigor Mortis and the Fangu, and potentially the Pit Hag if you really want to talk about things that kill evil roles. They can bluff some of the roles on here, such as the Sage, right? They can bluff other roles to say, hey, this is what I learned and when I died, and try to get trust that way. This is a different topic, but the Sage is kind of bluffable there. But for the most part, the information that's on here is trickier than just saying it's a direct, synergy. The synergy really is how much information there is on top and how effed it can be because of the demons that exist on the script. One thing of note, though, the bluffs on here are super, super good for the evil team. Is one main one is the philosopher, right? You can just say, hey, I'm the philosopher. I picked your role. You're drunk. Doesn't matter what you learned. It's arbitrary. Conversely, one of the hardest roles to bluff on here is the dreamer, and this is one of the weaker points of Sex and Violence. The dreamer is not an easy role for the evil team to bluff. If they pick a player and they learn the good role, and the good role is accurate to what the other player says, that's hard to lie about, If you're an evil player trying to bluff that, you probably have to pick your own team first and then hear some claims from other players and try to play social like that. But it is not as synergistic as, say, a spy might be on this script. So that is a weak point on Sex and Violence. All right, alternative win conditions on Trouble Brewing. We have two that are good based, one that is evil based. I would call the Slayer an alternative win condition. You're basically shooting your shot, literally. And if you hit the demon, we'll say that there's no Scarlet Woman in play. The game ends. You win. It's a great thing. The Mayor, instead of figuring out who the demon is, the good team just has to put their trust in one player. And if they trust that that player is that role, and they make sure that there's no poisoner alive by the end of the game, that's another way for the good team to succeed and win. Finally, we have the Outsider, the Saint. The Saint, if they die by execution, the good team loses on this script. That's a strong thing and a strong bluff for evil. Typically, Town doesn't have the taste for that. They won't go after it right away. It gives you some time. It's a great bluff for the poisoners and such. But yeah, as far as alternative win conditions go, it's a very, very strong one if they can get Town not trusting that player. It's almost like a reverse Mayor, right? There's a high cost to not being trusted. On Bad Moon Rising, the win conditions here are a little bit less direct. You have the Mastermind. That's a very specific alternative win condition. For the good team, you have the Courtier. It's not a win condition, but damn, you can stop the evil team from basically killing for multiple days if you get the demon right. If you were to poison or drunk the Zomboul, and then Town kills the Zomboul, the game ends. It's great, right? The other big one on here is the Devil's Advocate. You don't specifically win, right? But you could set up a condition where the good team cannot win. If the Devil's Advocate saves the demon, and mechanically there's no way for another day to happen without kills happening, that is it. It basically gets you a win prior to the final day, and it's very, very strong. I would also argue that roles like the Poe are incredibly strong for a not alternative win condition, but close enough. Final 5 in a Poe game, that's the last day. That's tricky. On Sex and Violence, there are a couple of different ones, and they're all evil related. So we have the Klutz. If they choose an evil player, their team loses. So that is very strong if they get stuck late into the game and there's not a lot of options. The Evil Twin, if you execute the good twin, the good team loses. The last one is the Vortox. The Vortox has a situation where if there's no executions for the day, then the Vortox's team wins. The Sage on this script allows you to find the demon. Now, let's talk about the misinformation that exists on all of the scripts, starting with Trouble Brewing. So Trouble Brewing has very, very straightforward ones, and I don't want to dig too deep into it, but it's basically the poisoner, the drunk, the recluse, the spy, and then you also have the red herring token that exists for the fortune teller. Everything else is misinformation based on how people are solving the game, right? So meaning how many outsiders are in play. The next one that we have on here is Bad Moon Rising, and the misinformation on here is mainly kills, right? Kills and executions. We do have a couple of forms of Droizen on here, the Goon being a big one. There's a lot of selecting roles, meaning you wake up at night and choose a player. If you were to choose the Goon, you become drunk if you're the first player to do it. And I should point out, all but one form of Poison and Droizen comes from the good team. The only one that comes from the evil team directly is the Pucka. The Pucka picks a player and that player will die the next day, but they're poisoned during that time. So on the good team, you have the Sailor, you have the Courtier, You got the minstrel, which can screw everybody up and confuse everything that's going on. You have the innkeeper, and I believe that's all of those. But then you also have the misinformation from kills, right? The tinker. The tinker is a huge misinformation thing on here. If a gossip gossips correctly, but a tinker dies, you have no idea if it was because the gossip was correct or because the storyteller was trying to confuse town with the tinker. A bluff for that on evil is very strong, but costly, obviously, because you lose an evil player. Now, the misinformation on sex and violence is legendary at this point, because all of the demons create misinformation. The Fangu makes, or I should say, encourages all of the outsiders to lie. They just have to lie. One of them already is lying, but it's something that they're trying to avoid being caught out. The Vigor Mortis can kill a evil player, and when that evil player dies, they poison one of their townsfolk neighbors. And synergistically, you'll notice on sex and violence, all of the roles except for one can operate into multiple days forward. I'd say that the artist and the seamstress typically go first night for the most part as well, but all of the other roles can be affected by the Vigor Mortis, which is something to consider when you're picking out your demons, right? The No Dashi poisons their townsfolk neighbors. That means it jumps over outsiders, it jumps over minions. The Vortox, which makes everybody receive false information. So a No Dashi and a Vortox are paired up really well. You don't know if your neighbor is the one creating the misinformation or if it's everybody's getting it. That's something you have to solve. On the good team, there's a couple of forms of that besides just all the lying that's happening. We have the Philosopher. The Philosopher does specifically drunk a player and can be a reason for the information to be wrong when it's passed around out there. From the minion side, the Pit Hag can change people into outsiders, which again we've talked about makes them do silly things like hide and lie about the role and double claim just so they can not be jumped to, or hide it if they do get jumped to. And then you got the Serenovus, which makes people double claim anyway, right? Whatever the Serenovus says, that's what you're doing that day. And it can also make you out as an outsider. Note that all the misinformation that is on here is balanced by the power of good. On Trouble Brewing, you've only got those several things that we mentioned. So on the good team, there's not things like the Dreamer, right? There's not things like the Savant and the Artist that asks where the exact spot of the demon is. It's a balanced situation. On BMR, you don't have things like the Dreamer or the Sage, right? There's a lot of death happening. If it had information that was that strong, well, it might not be a very fun script if you're fighting the demon in 2 days and they've got no way out of it. Conversely, on Sex and Violence, a lot of information, and it's mainly so you can share with the other good players to form a world to solve the demon type. So what's my point behind that? Well, you probably couldn't just throw a devil's advocate on Trouble Brewing and call it good. The DA is not a bluffable interaction on here, and it just outs them, similar to what we were talking about the Serenovus before. So it's something to consider when you're talking about what kind of misinformation and interactions that are happening. Now, oddly, on each of the base scripts, there's some form of neighbor interaction, right? On Trouble Brewing, we have the empath and the chef. The empath is good neighbors, the chef is evil pairs. On BMR, you've got the tea lady, right? On Sex and Violence, you've got both the Vigor Mortis and the No Dashi as well. Also, on all three of the base scripts, there's a publicly claimed role. The idea, I guess, behind this is to get you engaged and have everybody have something fun that they can do. It's very theatrical. If you've ever played any of Clocktower IRL, it's fun to just not be the Slayer, stand up, say, I'm the Slayer, I choose this player, and nothing happens. Because you know nothing's going to happen. You're not actually the Slayer. But it's fun. It's fun to do. It's not so much a balancing thing for the scripts, but it's something fun. And it also makes players claim a role. So on Bad Moon Rising, everybody can gossip. And if everybody gossips, it's really strong because the demon's not 100% sure who the real gossip is. So they're not sure if their gossip matters or not when they're deciding on if they should sink a kill, if they should kill that player, etc., etc. And then on Sex and Violence, you have the day one role of the Juggler. Probably one of the harder ones to use correctly. On your first day, you can guess up to 5 players and learn how many you got correct. It's kind of a scary one because there's, a lot of misinformation, a lot of people lying to you. But again, if you get everybody juggling, that's something to get people participating. And it gives you, for both this one, and it's not a public claimed role, the Gambler, but that one and the Juggler, get you talking to people day one and getting trust built up, right? If somebody gives you their hard claim on day one, and you juggle them, you form this situation that's really fun, right? Where you're like, I trust you. I've got a 1 on you. I know that you're good. Well, yeah. So it's not so much the balance of the script when it comes to publicly claimed stuff, but it is something interesting. It's definitely not a requirement, but it just happens to be shared between all of these scripts. The next thing, all of the scripts have some form of demon finder. So on Trouble Brewing, your main demon finder is the fortune teller. People love to give fortune teller pings out, good or evil. Tell you what, if you're on a fortune teller yes day 1 on Trouble Brewing, you're getting the axe somehow. People love going after their pings. It's not like it's good. It's good. There's misinformation there because you hit the red herring, you hit the recluse, right? Or the actual demon and then the scarlet woman, and you're just like, hey, you missed. So the synergy on that one is great. On BMR, you've got the exorcist, right? The exorcist on here, incredibly strong if they hit the demon. You could hit the demon and still 2-3 kills happen if the tinker goes off and maybe a godfather kill or an assassin or a gossip, right? So it's not perfect, but it is very strong. It's actually almost like a inverse monk where you're selecting a player to not kill instead of selecting a player to not die, right? But it does only target the demon. The interesting issue on that and something you could meta is if you, with the exorcist, pick a demon and then you die 2 days later. That means you probably hit the demon. Sex and Violence has actually a couple ways to find the demon. I'm not going to get into the artist. The artist is one of the strongest roles in the game. The Flower Girl learns if a demon voted today. What's interesting about the Flower Girl is that it has town kind of work together for it. What sucks about the Flower Girl is nobody ever wants to work with you on that. They just want to vote, right? So it's something you got to work around. Flower Girl, very strong information if you can get town to help you out. You also have the Snake Charmer. Snake Charmer. It finds the demon, all right. You might become the demon. That's part of the problem with the Snake Charmer. Very fun role, though. But it does find it. And then finally, you have the Sage, right? If the demon kills you, you get to see one of 2 players that is the demon. Those are all demon finder roles. Very strong. One other thing shared across all of the scripts is alignment checking, right? On Trouble Brewing, we've got the Empath. On BMR, we've got the Tea Lady. The Pacifist is less of a direct alignment check, but it is in fact an alignment check. Sex and Violence, the main one that checks here, is the Seamstress. You also have Oracles. All right, and then finally, role confirmation. So what do we have here for role confirmation on Trouble Brewing? You have several roles. You've got Washerwoman. You've got Librarian. You've got Investigator. That's more confirmation from an evil side, and I'll tell you what, the other side's not going to agree to it, right? They're not, oh yeah, you got me, I'm the Baron. That's not going to happen. You've got the Undertaker that learns who is executed that day. You've got the Raven Keeper who just chooses a player, and they just see who they are, right? On Bad Moon Rising, you have the Gambler, right? The Gambler straight up picks a character and tries to guess their role at the cost of their own life. Oh yeah, one other thing for Bad Moon Rising is the Grandmother, right? Then we have Sex and Violence. The role confirmation on here is mainly the Dreamer, right? The Dreamer is very, very strong. So the last thing I wanted to talk about here is reasons for evil players to die at night. So the main reason why this is important is because when a player dies on a script at night that has no reason for an evil player to die, they're just confirmed good. In Trouble Brewing, the Imp can Star Pass. And they actually can bluff the Raven Keeper when they Star Pass, provide more misinformation, gain trust from town, right? And then have that kind of play off of that. Because remember, one of the big notes and things on Blood on the Clocktower is the fact that death is not the end. When you die, you're still a player in the game. You still have an impact on the game. So it's very important that evil is able to bluff that. On Bad Moon Rising, the Zomboul can die at night, right? They just choose themselves. It's a reason for it. Potentially the assassin kills himself via a gamble or a gossip. If the storyteller gets, they talk to the evil team, they're like, yeah, you can gossip kill me if that happens. And then they can fake something. Maybe tinker, right? That'd be fun. Those are reasons for the evil team to die and reasons that, you shouldn't just trust every player that dies at night. Finally, on Sex and Violence, there's 3 different ways for this to happen. Pit Hag, when they make a new demon, the storyteller tends to kill Pit Hag and one good player, or they kill the old demon and the new and some players that everybody knows, things like that. The Fangu kills themselves when they jump to a outsider, and then the Vigor Mortis kills the minions. That's why the Oracle number on here is really interesting. because it's affected by almost every demon, right? Even the Vortox. Now, what are the takeaways from this? Remember, you did not design this game. You do not have the ability to change what the tokens say on here, so you don't have the luxury of balancing your script by changing abilities to fit that, right? It's fine. So when making a script, keep in mind why these scripts work together. Try to formulate your own ideas, and then make something that's functional. Once you get the ideas and the rules down for script building, you can intentionally break them. One other note for all of these is the replayability, right? The different minions on TB provide completely different games every time you play it. BMR, the demons and minion combos, create a lot of variability, as well as the town folks that are in play. And then sex and violence is all over the place with what can happen, but you know, there's still a lot of different ways that the games can play out, and that's very important when you're building your own scripts, right? And the balance among all of these is incredibly strong, and the only way you're going to know the exact balance of your script is to play it. So make sure that once you've created a script, you get it out there and you run it with some people, and I hope you have a good time. That's the main thing. All right. On the next video, we're going to start diving into how to make a script following my script building rules. Once we have all those script building rules, feel free to break them. My rules are not gospel. I'm sure there's so many script creators out there. Shout out to Leho and Navian that have their own script notes show that's amazing, and they dive in. And they have completely different ways and processes that they follow for their stuff. My stuff is not gospel. This is just something that I use for my purposes of building. But yeah, this overview here of the base 3 is to mainly provide you guys a template of what works, right? You see that the comparisons between the 3, these are big characteristics that exist. If these characteristics exist on your script, you've probably nailed 90% of what makes a good script, right? Especially the synergy side. But just remember, if your players are having fun, then you did a good job either way. All right, catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.